So most websites lose 90% of their visitors. Someone hops on your website, they don't find the answer to their question, and they immediately bounce. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to build a 24/7 inbound SDR agent that lives on your website and not only answers all your website visitors' questions, but actually qualifies them and then books sales meetings on your sales team's calendar. Now, before we dive into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay. I'm the founder of Acquisales. We're a go-to-market engineering firm helping go-to-market teams adopt AI to really scale their revenue. So if you like that kind of content, specifically around sales and how AI is impacting sales, follow me here on YouTube. To start, I think it'll be helpful to see what this AI SDR is actually meant to do before we dive into how it's doing certain things. So I'm going to walk through a demo of it on my website. This workflow I'm super intimately familiar with because when I first started my sales career, I was an inbound SDR, and a core part of my job was to actually monitor the website chat, qualify prospects, answer questions, and then hopefully book time for our account executives' calendars. And so I wanted to basically imitate and emulate that workflow for my business by creating this inbound SDR agent on my website. So let's say, for example, Bob comes in here and asks, am I a good fit? This is all powered by Claude Sonnet 4.6 under the hood. And the idea is that Bob can have a multi-turn conversation with this agent, answer questions around the business, and then the agent is also qualifying him to make sure it's a good use of both parties' times. So here, it's kind of giving some background information on Acquisales, like what does the company do? So let's say, we are part of, ABC Data Solutions, Inc., and we are trying to scale outbound. I have no idea why I need to also talk while I type. It's a very weird habit that I have, but anyway, so the idea is that, as Bob continues to answer these conversations, before we dive in, what's your first name? So let's say Bob, and email is, Bob at. Now, I don't know if there is a Bob at datasolutions.com, but I'm just coming up with a fictitious company and email just to kind of illustrate the conversation. But the idea is that the AI SDR is giving information around and kind of selling the value of our company while also qualifying the prospect. So the goal here is once some of these qualifying questions are answered, the AI SDR actually is like, hey, this is a good fit, this is a good use of our time. Let's actually book time on both of our calendars to explore how we could partner together, which is usually the typical workflow that I would do when I was being a SDR. Is I'd ask a couple qualifying questions while answering and kind of selling the value of the meeting. Based on everything you've shared, your strong fit, let's get more details locked in, pull up time to connect. Here's a link to, the calendar to connect. Now, important note, in the future, I want to move this to actually embed the calendar or have the agent suggest times. The reason that I want to have it start here is I've actually seen a drop-off of people actually going to the calendar link and then not booking time. So I want to split test the messaging here to make sure that I'm also double selling the value of the meeting. Or have some sort of offer here, maybe like a sales audit, a free custom build, something like that to kind of sell the value of the meeting. So for the time being, I am going to continue to split test this, and I highly recommend you guys do as well. But the interesting part is if we actually go back to HubSpot and we go in here and we actually look up the Bob, we will have a new contact in HubSpot in our CRM that just got created. It's currently 1:42 Central Time, so this just got created, and it'll show that Bob is part of data solutions, selling to data engineering teams. Basically, it takes the entire conversation that it just had and appends it as a note. So as the sales rep is preparing for the meeting, he has all the information from the conversation and he walks in more informed. Or if Bob for some reason didn't book time, you still have this contact information. We can go into Lead IQ or Clay, pull Bob's phone number. We already have his email, right? And we can reach back out to Bob to try to book time on our sales team's calendar. Now, I think the cool thing for me is when I was doing this manually, if 10 people were having active conversations on a website, I would have to shift between different conversations to keep context and understand what's going on and reply. But here, if 10 people show up, basically it's 10 separate conversations. They're all being able to get service to on a moment's notice. And so it's really cool because in theory, if 100 people show up on your website, you're not bottlenecked by the number of SDRs that are active at that time. You can have AI actually service and answer and qualify and hopefully book sales meetings across all those 100 people that are visiting simultaneously. Now let's walk through some of the code for this project because I think it is super interesting. The first thing I want to call out is for this project, I'm using the Claude Agent SDK. In the previous projects that I shared in my YouTube channel, I've always used raw Anthropic API calls, primarily because I was building more pipeline heavy workflows. And so I knew every single step in that pipeline, what needed an LLM call versus, what needed more deterministic Python function. Here, since it's an inbound chat, it's more open-ended, and I need the agent to be able to reason over tools and have a multi-turn conversation with a prospect. So the Agent SDK handles a lot of that out of the box, so it just made it way easier to implement this agent using the Claude Agent SDK. So here are the actual agent options, basically the configuration for my agent. So it's loading the system prompt, which we'll go through in a sec. The MCP servers, so whenever you want to have a custom tool, so there's 3 custom tools that this agent has access to. It can access the knowledge base. These are markdown files about my business that it can read when it needs to. Cal.com, this is what I use for booking meetings. It's similar to like Calendly or whatever insert meeting booking software. And then HubSpot is my CRM, which is to be able to create contacts, append notes from the conversation into HubSpot. And so these are the allowed tools that it has access to, very explicit on exactly what it can and can't do with it. So I was trying to keep this in a walled garden, if you will. And then the last thing is, if you don't set a model, it will default to the most expensive one. So for the longest time when I was doing the evaluations, I didn't realize that it was using Opus 4.7. So I was spending a bunch of money without realizing it. And so I highly recommend, depending on what your requirements are, set the model so that you can optimize for cost and latency based on that. So these are the actual configurations for the agent. Let's go to the system prompt, because I think that's always interesting for me to read from other projects. So here it's giving clear instructions and a role. Inbound SDR agent, here are your tasks, here's the tone. And then it gives a manifest of the knowledge base. So the AI agent knows exactly what markdown file to put into context and at what point. So if someone is asking about Acquisales services, it'll pull markdown files. If it's asking about go-to-market engineering, it gets more information about the go-to-market engineering services. And here is the actual knowledge base on the far left for these different markdown files. So the idea is that instead of loading my entire knowledge base into context at the start of the conversation, it only does it when it's required. And then it goes to the conversation flow. There's 2 things I want to call out here. The first one is this, which I did show in the demo, but the idea is that we want to capture the lead as quickly as possible, because if not, if people get distracted all the time, so they might hop off your website, they might get pulled into a meeting, and they never continue the conversation. So if you're burning tokens, you might as well capture the lead in the process so your sales team can follow up. So turn to always ask for the name and always ask for the email if possible, and then keep qualifying while answering questions. The second thing is a gate. So if there is a company that is B2C, so they're selling like, software drinks, or not software drinks, soft drinks, or like energy drinks to consumers directly, that's not a good use case. That's not a good customer for us. So disqualify them. If their timeline is like 6 months or a year from now to implement services, then it's not an active opportunity. Disqualify them and don't provide them a meeting link. So this is the overall flow. Here's the booking flow and then output for the URLs, but that stuff is a little bit less interesting. I think the gate and the conversation flow and the manifest are the most important pieces for the system prompt. Actually, if we go back to the client, you'll see here some of these allowed tools. So here is the tool. This is the syntax that Anthropic provides in their Agent SDK documentation on how to create custom tools. Something that I think is super important here is this part, which is the actual description of the tool. One of the hardest things that I had when I was actually building this is the fact that the model would not know what tool to use. And so when it doesn't use the tool, it still very confidently hallucinates. So for example, it might, you might ask a question about go-to-market engineering services, and this tool is allowing the agent to read this markdown file, but the agent wasn't using the tool, so it just used information that inferred based on training data or just randomly came up with, when in reality, it needs to only answer questions with the information from this markdown file. So it is very, very important to make sure that the description is very accurate so that the agent knows what tool to leverage. Now, on the topic of tools, one additional thing that I do want to call out is this part right here where it says permission mode don't ask, and this would allow tools. So this is really important when you think about things like prompt injection, because out of the box, the Agent SDK gives the agent the ability to do like read, like bash commands, basically be able to execute code. And so when you actually have, the permission modes don't ask, and then you have the allowed tools and you list out the allowed tools, it really tightens exactly what the agent can do so that it prevents any sort of prompt injection. So here the agent can only do specific things within HubSpot, which is to create a lead and then attach the qualification. It can't do anything else to our CRM. It can only send out the calendar link to that specific meeting type from cal.com, and it can only read the files from my knowledge base. So the idea there is having the permission mode and the allowed tools very tightly coupled allows the agent enough free room to use the tools, but then also it only has specific tools, so it can't go and execute code in my environment. Now I'm using a few other technologies outside of just the Claude Agent SDK. I'm using FastAPI, Pydantic, and Railway. And so how this actually looks like in kind of end-to-end, all these services coming together, is a user will come in, they might ask a question to the chatbot itself. This triggers the first piece of our flow where basically there's a post request getting sent to the Railway backend. We look to see if there's a unique session ID in case someone's coming back to the website. But essentially, Pydantic validates the HTTPS request and then kicks off a Claude Agent subprocess. And then from there, it loads files from our knowledge base and then streams that response back to the UI. And then the next turn of the conversation, they answer with their first name and then their email address. Goes through the whole process. This time we're creating a lead in HubSpot, and then streams a response back. And then from there, there's that last turn of the conversation where it passes the gate for under 90 days, and then it returns a calendar link to end the conversation. So this is a kind of an end-to-end life of a prompt throughout multiple turns. So hopefully this is helpful to understand exactly what are the different technologies, what parts they play, and how that all comes together to kind of bring this conversation to life. Now, if you want to implement this AI SDR for your business, I'm going to leave a link in the description below to where you can get a build order markdown file that you can feed to any AI coding agent that you're using, and it will implement this exact same AI SDR for your business. So if you want to implement this in your business, click the link in the description below. All right, guys, that's the video for today. If you found it valuable, subscribe to the YouTube channel. On this channel, I post weekly about AI agents, as well as sales and sales fundamentals. I'm super interested in kind of the intersection between how AI is really implementing revenue and go-to-market. So if you like that kind of content, follow me here. And I do try to post weekly, so I will see you guys next week in the next video. See y'all.